Time now for today's press review, and I'm joined by Alison Sargent. Hi, Alison.
Hi, Tom.
Let's begin, shall we, with reaction to President Donald Trump's acquittal by the Senate of all impeachment charges.
That's right, Tom. Not a very surprising outcome, but reason for the right-wing papers to celebrate nonetheless. The Wall Street Journal has a very simple headline today: Trump acquitted. They saved the gloating for their editorial, which is headlined James Madison 1, Nancy Pelosi 0. Now, for our non-American viewers, James Madison is one of the founding fathers, so the Wall Street Journal's message with this editorial is basically that senators made the constitutionally correct decision that our founding fathers might have made. Right-wing tabloid The New York Post rubs it in even harder on their front page today. It's Trump's turn to rip, and we see him there ripping up the articles of impeachment in the same way Nancy Pelosi ripped up his State of the Union address the other day. A front page that no doubt is going to have a lot of left-wing Americans ripping up today's issue of The New York Post.
Okay, so the right-leaning press having a bit of a field day there. Left-leaning newspapers a little bit more subdued.
That's right. Left-wing tabloid The New York Daily News has a sarcastic declaration of relief on their front page today. Our long national nightmare is over, they say, and then in parentheses underneath, far from it, actually. The New York Times, meanwhile, is more factual. Their headline, a split Senate clears Trump on all counts in finale of a bitter impeachment battle. In their editorial, the paper asks, what will finally defeat Donald Trump? And they are completely inconclusive. They write that Donald Trump can really do whatever it takes to win re-election, and the Republican Party is going to have his back, as they've proved in this vote. There was one Republican, though, who did break ranks with his party in that impeachment vote, Mitt Romney, a former presidential candidate himself. We see him here in this Nancy Pelosi-inspired cartoon by Matt Davies, ripping up partisan impeachment, causing Donald Trump, in response, to rip out his own hair. The Republican blowback against Mitt Romney for that vote has been pretty fast and fierce. Donald Trump's oldest son is actually calling for Mitt Romney now to be expelled from the Republican Party.
Goodness me. Now let's move south to Brazil, where the president there has sparked controversy by his choice of who should oversee the country's isolated indigenous tribes. It is none other than a former evangelical missionary.
That's right, a pastor who worked with an American evangelical group for years, seeking to convert indigenous people in the Amazon. They've been working there since the 1950s. His appointment has sparked huge concern from indigenous groups. They're worried that this pastor, whose name is Ricardo Lopes Diaz, could reverse Brazil's very strict policy of no contact with their remaining remote indigenous people, something that could lead to the mass death of indigenous people if they get sick through irresponsible contact. So that policy, there's a reason that it's been in place in Brazil for so long. Ricardo Lopes Diaz has said he won't promote the evangelization of indigenous people, but he hasn't said whether or not he might reverse Brazil's no contact policy. The Guardian notes that Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro has quite frequently made racist comments about indigenous people in Brazil. He's also regularly criticized their protected land in the Amazon and has been dismantling environmental and indigenous protections to please his base of miners and farmers. The Guardian cites critics who say that this appointment shows that Bolsonaro is also being motivated by promises he made to religious voters, and they say that cultural annihilation is actually guiding his presidency. So very strong alarm bells ringing in Brazil.
Okay, now to a slightly lighter story. In India, a story you picked out for us about residents in a small town in Kerala who got a bit of a surprise when they turned on the taps.
That's right, Tom, because it wasn't water that came out, but rather water mixed with alcohol. To be more specific, beer, rum, and brandy. Now, this story is actually on the front page of the Times of India today. The paper writes, wishing wells only exist in folklore, but this town saw its wildest dreams come true. It turns out it wasn't magic, though. It was actually a government mistake. Officials had dumped 4,500 liters of seized liquor into a pit that then flowed into a nearby well that was the water source for this town. It's worth mentioning that this story really could have gone very differently had that alcohol been tainted. Illegal alcohol has been known to kill hundreds of people in India. As it is, though, everyone was fine and people are laughing about it on social media. Drinking water is going to be supplied to the families affected while that well gets cleaned up. In the meantime, I suppose you could say they have the best of both worlds.
Well, quite a cocktail there. Beer, rum, rum and brandy.
Yeah.
Right. Lastly, we're going to turn to Turkmenistan because the president has issued an edict. The male government employees over 40 years of age are not supposed to dye their hair any longer.
That's right, Tom. And not only that, but those who do not have gray hair are reportedly being asked to dye it. So basically, everyone over 40, male workers, have to have gray hair one way or another. This story comes from The Independent. They cite the Russian language station of Radio Free Europe. They write that the president of Turkmenistan, who is 62, is actually rather well known for having kind of an obsession with youth. But in August of last year, he himself began appearing in public with his natural gray hair. And apparently, he really doesn't want to be alone in that, hence ordering all male government employees over 40 to also follow suit and let their hair be gray. The Independent notes that leaders in Turkmenistan actually have a flair for dramatically absurd policies like this one. Apparently, another former leader actually renamed the days of the week after his family members. So it all kind of makes you dream about what you might do, Tom, if you were the president of Turkmenistan.
Well, that's something for me to think about. Thank you very much indeed, Alison Sargent, for today's press review. And you can check out our website, france24.com, and click on the tab In the Press.